This semester, our students are working with the Muncie Sanitary District to identify microplastic particles in the wastewater collection system. Many of us have learned, from various sources that microplastics are a major emerging concern these days. They are everywhere. They are tiny, hard to be detected, but they potentially have a lot of impacts to the environment, ecosystem, and even human health. So our students are really interested in learning the sources of those plastic particles and whether they are impacted by, how do we manage the land, human activities, etc.
We wanted to try and get the amount of microplastics per different area based on the usage of that land. So then we kind of had like a good idea of how many microplastics and what microplastics were inside Muncie, just to be a little bit more aware of what's inside of our water.
And we were able to look at 5 different sites, 3 of them coming directly from the sanitary district. And we were able to collect samples from each site and bring those into the lab and look at them under microscopes.
Collecting samples from these areas and analyzing microplastics in them, we were able to, trace back to the hotspots in the city area and understand, where microplastics come from.
So microplastics are a pollution of concern. They're an emerging pollution, which means that we don't know enough about them, but we know that we're finding them in our water and our environmental systems, our soil. And so when we test for them, we look for them, we want to see what kind of effects they'll have on our health, on our environments. So we went out as a class and we collected samples of water at different inflow lines around Muncie. And we took these samples and we processed them by filtering out the water and then collecting anything that was left behind. That could be organic matter, it could be microplastics, and then we tested for that. So then after we filtered everything to get our samples, we applied Nile red or a dye, a neon dye that would adhere to the plastic particles. And then we looked at them under a microscope to determine if we were seeing fragments, filaments, or films of microplastics.
We also did a tour of the water treatment itself. So we kind of got to understand the process. We got to kind of see what the treatment is like.
The experience was really cool. I think it felt more professional. It felt more realistic in terms of maybe what I'd be doing outside of school.
There were definitely ups and downs, and we were all, going back and redoing things to make sure that our results were as accurate as we could make them. But it was really fun. We got to spend a lot of time out of class, and I think we all honestly became closer as peers through it.
Overall, it was kind of very nice to understand the experimental process, the lab process, kind of know what microplastics are, and then also kind of be more integrated inside the Muncie community.
So students can gain a lot of hands-on experiences from such immersive learning projects. They really enjoyed the processes, starting from, conducting a holistic research, starting from talking to people, and then making project design, go through all the processes, and at the end produce deliverables. Conducting research is not like a straight line as expected. Students were able to, experience those difficulties, going through the bumps and try to learn how to solve them.
The skills that I learned in the lab in this type of project, where we're completely doing the entirety of the project as a team, and it starts with us and ends with us. I think working in a lab in that setting has given me, I've learned a lot more about what it might feel like to work in a lab outside of school or after college, after I graduate.
I think for me, what I've learned is how important it is to gather data for a community and local data. A lot of times when we think about doing something for the greater good or making an impact, we think of them on a large scale, but our communities and the communities that we live in are really important, and doing things for them, like doing things for the Muncie community, that was really important. And I want to do that in my hometown when I go back, and do research for them, something that's impactful for my community.